Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something I think pretty amazing. It's this idea that, with everything going on in the universe, that God knows each of us personally.
Mm-hmm.
We've got two great sources for this deep dive, a devotional from the Apostolic Faith Church and a passage from Matthew,
Okay.
both kind of pointing to the same truth. And I think, have you ever felt like just one face in the crowd or even forgotten sometimes?
Oh, yeah. I think that's something we all feel at some point.
Yeah, and these sources really offer a beautiful reminder that you are seen and known and loved more than you can imagine.
It's really fascinating how this idea speaks to that deep human need to be recognized, to be valued as an individual, not just, one of the masses.
It's so true. It's funny, thinking about this whole idea of being known
Hmm.
reminded me of when I was a kid. I come from a really big family, 13 kids total,
Wow.
5 boys, 8 girls.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of
I
chaos.
can only imagine.
But, as much as it was full of love, I think my parents, they definitely struggled sometimes to keep all of our names straight.
Yeah, that.
And so there were definitely times when I think some of us felt a little lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
Imagine this. Dinner time rolls around, and my mom or dad's calling out name after name, trying to get somebody's attention,
Mm.
Sandy, Marie, Dickie, Laney. And we'd all be like, okay, who's in trouble now?
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely some mix-ups.
Yeah, but.
Sometimes they'd even be like, you know, you with the glasses on, which wasn't very helpful because half of us wore glasses.
Right.
But, as funny as it was, there were times when it was really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
It made you wonder, like, do they even really see me? Do they know me as a person?
Right.
And so that kind of brings me to this question. Could you imagine God with his immeasurable family ever forgetting one of his children?
That's a good question.
And that's where this devotional God Knows Your Name comes in.
Yeah, and the devotional really jumps right into that question and gives us such a reassuring message. Even with the huge family God has, he never loses track of a single soul.
Exactly. And it really emphasizes that when God calls your name, he knows exactly who he's talking to.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mix-up. There's no searching through a list. He's focused on you.
Yeah.
And it highlights this verse from Matthew 10:30 that says, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's a powerful image.
Yeah, it really speaks to just how much attention to detail God has for each of us.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't see this blurry collective. He sees each of us individually, every little detail. He knows you when you're up. He knows you when you're down.
It's like he's saying, I see all of you and I love every part.
Mm-hmm.
But the devotional doesn't just stop there. It goes on to explore, the different reasons why God might actually call our name.
It is interesting. It suggests that, sometimes it's to draw our hearts closer to him or to encourage a deeper commitment or sometimes even to call us to action in some way.
So it's not just knowing that we're recognized, it's knowing that he is active in our lives and wants us to grow and to serve.
Exactly.
And the devotional even says that these calls from God aren't just, in our imagination, but that they're real personal invitations for us to connect with him.
And you know what? This idea of a personal invitation from God, that leads perfectly into this passage from Matthew we have. Before we jump into Matthew, I think it's worth kind of pausing and thinking about what a huge shift in perspective this is. Like, to think that the God who made everything, who put the stars in place, knows each of us, like really knows us, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
And it also makes you realize, like, you don't have to pretend with God.
Right.
He sees the real you, the messy parts, the imperfect you, and loves you anyway.
He does. That's such a good point. Knowing that God sees us so clearly, it's not about him judging us. It's about this love that goes beyond our flaws, that meets us where we are, even when we feel completely alone.
It does. That's so true.
So it's not just that he knows our name,
Yeah.
but he really knows our hearts too.
Exactly. And that makes our relationship with him so much deeper and real.
Yeah.
We can be honest with God about our doubts, about our fears, our struggles. We don't have to act like we have it all together because he already knows.
Yeah.
He sees it all. He sees the loneliness. He sees the pain and the joy, all of it.
Yeah. And being honest like that, I feel like, is where we can really experience how close we can be to God in a way that we might not be able to otherwise.
That's a really good way to put it. It's when we're honest that we really feel God's grace and mercy, in a real way.
It makes me think back to what the devotional was saying about, how God calls our name for different reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's to commit more deeply or to do something specific,
Yeah.
or sometimes it's just to be closer to him.
And a lot of times those calls come in subtle ways. Just a quiet thought in your heart or a sense of clarity when you're trying to make a decision, or maybe an unexpected chance to help someone in need.
So it's not always this booming voice from the sky.
Exactly. It might just be a little nudge, a recurring thought, or even something that pushes you outside your comfort zone.
It's really about being aware of those little moments,
Mm-hmm.
being open to hearing his voice, even when life is really busy and chaotic.
Yeah, and knowing that God knows us personally, that's what gives us the courage to step out in faith, knowing we're not alone.
Hmm.
Even when we feel unsure or scared, he sees us. He knows our name, and he guides us every step of the way.
And that brings us to the passage from Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 through 31. I just love the language here. It's so poetic, and it uses this image of sparrows to show God's love and care.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with this question. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care.
That's beautiful.
It's such a simple thing,
Yeah.
but it's really profound when you think about it.
Yeah.
Even the tiniest creatures, they're all under God's watchful eye.
Yeah.
And if he cares for the sparrows, how much more does he care for us?
Right.
And that's what the next verse says. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows.
I love that.
And it's like what we were talking about with the devotional.
It is.
God knowing the number of hairs on our head. God knowing every little detail about us shows how much he loves and cares for us.
It's a really powerful message, don't you think?
It is. Especially for those times when we feel overlooked or lost or unimportant.
Exactly. So let's take this a step further. What does it mean for you, the listener, knowing that God knows you personally and deeply no matter what?
Yeah. How does this knowledge change the way you live your life? How you deal with struggles or how you connect with others, even how you connect with God?
Those are great questions to consider. What happens when we truly believe that God knows us better than we know ourselves?
Yeah.
It's pretty humbling.
It is.
To know that God sees every thought, every happy and sad moment, the highs and lows of life. But it's also really freeing.
Yeah.
It really is. And it makes me wonder, if we could talk to God knowing he's always listening and sees us so completely, and just be totally honest, what would we say?
That's a powerful question. It really makes you think about what you would say if you could strip away all the fancy words and just have a real conversation with God who knows us better than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like what hopes and fears would you share? What dreams, your doubts? What questions would you ask him or what would you thank him for?
The best part about that question is that there's no right or wrong answer. It's just an invitation to talk to God from your heart.
Yeah, you really remind us that praying isn't about, saying things we've memorized or following some kind of rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's about really opening up our hearts to God and sharing what's inside, knowing that he cares and is listening. It doesn't matter what's going on in our lives. We can always talk to him.
And it's not just us talking to God. It's about listening to him, too. Being open to hearing his voice or seeing how he's working in our lives. Maybe he's speaking to you when you're surrounded by people or brings someone into your life when you feel all alone.
That's when it gets really amazing.
Yeah.
When we go beyond just talking at God and really connect with him.
And I think that feeling of connection is what brings us peace and comfort and helps us feel like we belong.
Yep.
Knowing that God knows us and loves us, that he sees each of us individually and calls us by name.
It changes everything, doesn't it?
It does.
It changes how we see ourselves and the world and how we connect with God.
Absolutely.
So as we finish up this deep dive, let's remember this. You are known, you are loved, and God knows your name.
Mm-hmm.
And may knowing that give you the courage to be yourself, to live with purpose, and to know that you're not just another face in the crowd, but a unique and irreplaceable part of God's love. He knows your name. Do you know his?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.